You're listening to episode 182 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practice from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Sweeping Zen founder Adam Tebbe joins us to speak about his new documentary film project, Zen in America. The Zen tradition has been in the United States for quite a while now on the scale of, well, Buddhism in America at least, and as such has well-established roots. Founders have recognized Dharma heirs, and those heirs have, in turn, become respected and accomplished teachers in their own right. Zen, it can be said, is thriving in the U.S., but what does that really look like? And how might that be communicated through film? Few people have represented the idea of free inquiry in contemporary Western Zen practice as today's guest. Adam Tebbe is the founder of Sweeping Zen. He trained to become a licensed chemical dependency counselor, but found that he enjoys this work far better. Adam also does some news gathering for Buddha Dharma, the Practitioner's Quarterly, owned by the Shambhala Sun Foundation. So sit back, relax, and have a nice Sierra Nevada. Adam, that one's for you. Our returning guest today is the founder of the site Sweeping Zen, Adam Tebbe. Adam, welcome back. Nice to speak with you again.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Ted.
So things have been very active on Sweeping Zen, and before we get to our main topic today, I want to chat for a few minutes about that. There was a roundtable discussion at this year's Buddhist Geeks conference that I think may not have happened without your openness about the recent problems that have been occurring in our Zen communities. And this is on some of the allegations of misbehavior that are going on. Adam, have you found that there's a greater willingness on the part of Sanghas to talk about their problems rather than hiding them, as apparently has been done in the past?
Okay, the response has been pretty mixed, actually. There's still some corners in the Zen world which tend to be very insular and maybe a bit isolationist. And then there are other groups that seem to have found this stuff to be a breath of fresh air and something that they appreciate having a discussion about. But there are, and I'm not going to name them specifically, but there are still some groups who oftentimes will use the banner of well, we're a monastic community, so we really don't talk much to the quote outside world, and I never really quite understand that anyway. Like this distinction between because to me it seems like it sets up like this us and them.
Yeah, we've seen that sort of thing with, say, another tradition church saying, well, we don't follow secular law. We have our own law. And that lets us get away with things that are blatantly criminal.
Yeah. And that's the question, too, with a lot of these things. I don't think it's not the majority of states, but in some states, some of this clergy misconduct stuff is technically illegal as well. It's not just ethically a challenge. So, I don't know what's going to happen here what people will do with this down the line. Like my instinct tells me like just over time maybe, and I'm talking years, people might start to get it and maybe start making some changes. But Zen and Buddhism in general is pretty damn young here, and we're still kind of figuring out what we're doing even. So but this stuff should be the no-brainer stuff at the start, like in terms of figure out all the ritual stuff and how we dress and all that stuff. But in terms of like how we treat people who come into the community, that should be priority number one.
So let's get into the topic at hand. You have a new project you're working on. Tell us about that. What is it?
I do. It's it's going to be a documentary. It's tentatively titled Zen in America. And the idea is to sort of go around North America. And yeah, that includes Mexico, but we'll see how I manage getting there. It'll probably be more toward the end. So the focus is going to be primarily the United States and Canada. And so I'll be going around to different sanghas and collecting footage of them doing their ritual and practices, and also talking to the teachers there for interviews to create sort of a multi-part documentary series on Zen in America. And so the idea is to kind of give an overview of the history, how it came here, and then kind of tackle individual subjects in the series as it goes on. So I got the idea originally when I had from June to July of this year, I had gone to North Fork, California to do a 30-day retreat with Myoan Grace Shearson out at Empty Nest Zendo. And while I was there, she had a bunch of visiting teachers that came out, like Hozan Alan Sanaki and Chikudo, Lou Richmond, and Sojin Diane Martin and James Ishmael Ford. At some point I realized, oh, gee, this might be an interesting thing to do. And because I had this opportunity to kind of meet these people. And so I ordered like a kind of entry-level camcorder at the time, and just sort of, and this was after a few of the teachers had already come. So I believe it was just Alan Sanaki who was there and able and willing to be interviewed. And so, I interviewed him. I interviewed a lot of the Sangha members that were participating there, because it was kind of funny. Like, I'm at this retreat, which is actually for sort of like a seminary for priests, right? Offered by the Shogaku Zen Institute. And so I wasn't there for that purpose. I was just there to kind of do a 30-day retreat. Most of the people there were priests or kind of on that trek. And so there were some interesting people there that I talked to, like Paul Cooper. He's written some books on Zen and psychoanalysis. And Christine Palmer, she's one of the San Francisco Zen Center's sewing teachers. Blanche Hartman. And Laurie Sinaki and Susan McDonald of Monterey Bay Zen Center. So, we talked about all kinds of interesting stuff. And Laurie and Alan helped me then get an interview with Sojin, Mel Weitzman, at Berkeley Zen Center after I had kind of completed the retreat there. And that was where I kind of realized, like, hey, this could actually be something kind of cool. And I went to visit him and met for about an hour. Really nice guy, down to earth. And then I went over to Hartford Street Zen Center to talk with Mio Leahy. And that lasted about an hour as well.
So, Adam, was there a standard set of questions that you were asking each person, or did it vary and was a bit more organic in nature?
There were some standard questions, and also some that were more tailored toward who I'm talking to. So, like, for instance, a couple of things that I want to do while I talk to some of these people is talk about some of these teachers that they may have kind of had interactions with who are now deceased, who we can't really talk to. And so I asked Mio Leahy for some memories and talk a little bit about Isan Dorsey and Philip Whalen. And Sojin talked a little bit about Suzuki Roshi. And so that's part of it. I have some of these boilerplate kind of questions that I've been asking in terms of, like, how has Zen changed for you since you first began practice? How has Zen in the country changed that you've noticed? What are some of the characteristics that you've noticed here? I'm going to use the term West, but we'll just keep it to the Americas, I guess. Mostly North American, and really, I know I'm kind of exempting Mexico, but it's not like it's really taken off there in Mexico. So I'm really kind of talking mostly about the United States and Canada, and just how has it changed over the years? What are some of the hallmarks that kind of stand out for you? And, some of the responses that talk about the empowerment of women, talking about sort of a more lay-oriented approach to Zen practice. I'll kind of go on too. Like this month, I got invited to go up to the Great Heartland Buddhist Temple of Toledo, which is now part of James Ford's Boundless Way Zen community. And that's run by Reverends Jay Wyke and Do-On Wyke. I should say Rinsen Wyke and Do-On Wyke. And their history comes from having studied, I think Do-On studied with Richard Clark, and Rinsen studied with Dido Laurie. And anyway, long story short, they invited me up there to come kind of film during their session, and that was it's a really interesting experience. And I got to interview that time then James Ford, and also I interviewed Rinsen and Do-On together, sort of as a couple. That was also, I should say, when I went up there, my equipment had completely changed. Some of the earlier interviews that I had done, I'm not real happy with the audio or the video quality, but now I got a nice Canon and really nice tripod set up and everything else. So, and that was made possible by a lot of people who sort of contributed hearing about the film happening. It was interesting though to be able to kind of enter that practice environment. Like I sort of, I had this fear that I'd go up there and kind of be intruding on their space a bit, or just sort of being an eyesore. Like, who wants to be filmed while they're meditating or doing oryoki or that kind of stuff?
Especially oryoki, if you've seen me eat.
Yeah. Well, that, and there's all kinds of varying degrees of people with oryoki. That, some are really great at it, and some kind of just learn this thing, and they're kind of looking to the right or left, figuring out. I'm still kind of a little bit in that camp, especially when you go into like a new place where the forms are going to be just a little bit different. And so I think I was confused by there was one extra cloth or something this time.
Yeah, it can set the whole tone off in a wildly different direction just by this one little variable that you're not used to.
Yeah.
So, Adam, what are some of the things, even though you've only done a few of these interviews, it's early on in the process, what are some of the most interesting answers that people have said in their conversations with you? What's stood out as something you either weren't expecting or you were, but still to hear it was fascinating to you?
There's really nothing has been yet, to be honest, super like mind-blowing in terms of stuff that really, really stands out. Because really we've not gotten into like some of the meat of things. I'm still kind of figuring out where I want this thing to go in the end. And so, it was interesting to hear Alan Sinaki talking candidly about, his relationship with Robert Aiken, and sort of giving, there's been portraits of Aiken that sort of give a pretty fair view of him. And I felt that this was sort of in that line where it wasn't just, okay, this guy's dead, so we're going to just speak really awesome about him. It was more of a realistic kind of portrait, and yet at the end you still get this sense that Alan really, really respects the guy and kind of sees him as a Dharma father or grandfather or something. So that was interesting, and Sojin was pretty fun too. I mean, I can't remember exactly. All I remember is the question that I asked about Suzuki Roshi about memories. Like, he really didn't spend too much time there. I don't know. It's probably one of those things that he probably gets asked quite a bit. It's sort of a boilerplate type of thing. But yeah, I would have to say Alan's response on Aiken was something that sort of stands out for me most.
Adam, what is the idea of having this project? What are you hoping that the viewers of it, when it does come out, what are you hoping they get out of it?
Well, that's a good question that goes into some of the reasons why I decided to even take this on, because it's sort of a huge kind of ambitious project, and really not having any filmmaking background, like I worry a bit about if I'm going to be able to pull it off, But what I want viewers to walk away with is this. A lot of times when I've gone to different practice centers, it's to no fault of their own, and really they don't need to know this stuff, but there's not really oftentimes a great amount of understanding about the history or who else is sort of doing this thing outside of their own single sangha in their own single teacher. And it's as though all these other traditions and expressions and kind of manifestations of Zen are kind of not on their radar. And so I want them to walk away just sort of without having to go and read a book, which would be wonderful, but not everybody's going to do that. A lot of people are more interested in Dharma books that are focusing on sort of the Dharma teachings rather than the history, as it were. And so, I want it to be sort of like an easy, digestible format for people to just sort of walk away with and kind of have a little bit more understanding of who those early players were and also kind of who some of these other voices are today going around. And I'll just say, like, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this documentary too was, it's still true today, but when I first started getting interested in Zen and I would watch films on it, it was almost always like stereotypical, and you wouldn't be aware of it until you actually walk into like your first Zen center. But it was kind of usually filmed in Japan, number one, and kind of giving a very monastic perspective, which honestly, I mean, you can find that here to a degree, but the majority of practice centers, you're not going to really see that kind of thing going on. And as a matter of fact, you're probably going to see more often like potluck oryoki or or like, Zen teachers with the baseball cap on with their rakusu, just it's not the same imagery. And so I want it to be true. I don't want it to just be like, here is what Zen is. A lot of times that's the other thing, that when you watch some of these documentaries, which there's a number of them, nice ones available even on YouTube just for free to watch, that kind of present Zen as sort of like this monolithic kind of thing, where it's just usually the Rinzai school and the Soto school, and that's it. And there's a whole bunch of other traditions going on here that don't really get discussed or talked about.
So having that community perspective, that wider sense of a community of Zen in North America at the practitioner level, I think you have a great opportunity to call it Zen in America and then subtitle it Potluck Oryoki. That's a good phrase. You use that phrase. That's a good one.
I think I got, because when I was talking to Paul Cooper, he was saying he might change it now after his experience at the 30-day retreat. But I know that he was saying he's got a small sangha in Pennsylvania, and a lot of times they would just kind of do these potlucks for food. And even at Emptiness Zendo, like, it wasn't the first 2 meals of the day. And this is, a seminary training program here in the United States. The first 2 meals, yes, were traditional oryoki, and we did that in the Zendo. But then our dinner meal was sort of a buffet in a different room, a very healthy food and everything else. And, everything was not, and I've noticed this in a number of different places, like, there's not the same strict adherence to silence necessarily. Not always. Depends on where you're at. Some places are a little bit more loose with it than others. And so there's just a lot of stuff going on here that you really won't find in some of the more conservative definitions of Zen.
So you're early on in the phases. You've done a few interviews. You're starting to get your equipment squared away and learning more about the process. How can people help out with this?
They can start by just going and visiting the website, zeninamerica.com, and there we'll have links to a fundraising effort that we're going to be doing, and also a donate tab if you want to just donate directly to PayPal. There will be certain contribution levels there that you can find if you're interested in sort of being listed as a co-producer in the final product. And also there's actually an Amazon wish list, which if people don't want to give funding directly, there are some items still sort of that I think would come in handy for the purposes of filming and that sort of thing. I got most of the equipment squared away. All the basics are squared away, but there are some extras where that might be able to help as well.
So for folks interested in coming, it's www.zeninamerica.com. Our guest today has been Adam Tebbe, powerhouse behind Sweeping Zen. Adam, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Teb.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizan Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are also linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.